Over to you, Bhakti. You can start.
Thank you. Thank you so much, NOGS, and thank you, Aideri ma'am, for giving me this opportunity. So the topic that we are going to discuss is obstetrics module. The reason why we have decided to include this as a training part of general practitioners is to update the knowledge of all general practitioners regarding what are the recent advances in obstetrics. So the safe motherhood policy basically includes promotion of women's right and gender sensitivity. It also believes in providing access to quality health and nutrition services to all mothers, focusing on health promotion, education, and advocacy, establishing linkages and developing collaboration to ensure sustainability, mobilizing communities to address family planning, maternal and newborn care, and also to empower communities to recognize and correct the gender discrimination and preventing violent abusive behavior towards women, which we find is very rampant in our society, and of course reporting and reviewing of all maternal deaths. So under this safe motherhood policies, there are certain guidelines and procedures which have been laid out. The first one of which is to ensure a quality maternal and newborn care. So these services should be available as close as possible to where a woman lives. They should be acceptable to potential users and should be responsive to local cultural norms. And there should be an adequate supply of all the essentials. They should also, the services should also be comprehensive. They should be linked to other reproductive services, and they should be rendered by people who are technically competent. They should also involve the client, that is the woman and her family, in decision making, and they should encourage family and community involvement in prenatal and postnatal services. So now, what are the elements, basic elements of this quality care? What does it mean to give quality care? So this will include the prenatal care, the delivery care, and the postnatal care. Now, what are the components of prenatal care? So every pregnant woman should have at least 4 prenatal visits for health promotion regarding getting an advice on nutrition, breastfeeding, newborn care, uh, assessment of her health in terms of history, examination, and performing various screening tests, preventing certain diseases like tetanus through immunization, and health supplements like ferrous sulfate and folic acid should be made available to her. It also gives an opportunity to treat any ailments which are found during her visits like STD, anemia, and toxemia. The second part is the delivery care. So all deliveries should be attended by a skilled attendant, that is a person who is competent, who is trained, and who is experienced in conducting deliveries, and it should be available within 2 hours from the first level referral. So the caregiver should ensure that he provides good quality care which is hygienic and safe. He should be able to recognize and manage complications, should monitor the progress of labor using partograph, and should refer promptly whenever higher care level is needed. Now, the postpartum and newborn care includes at least 2 postpartum visits 1 month apart for services like newborn screening for 8 congenital metabolic disorders, APGAR scoring, cord care, initiation and maintenance of exclusive breastfeeding, and immunization like BCG and polio, and complete assessment of the growth of the baby. Now, let's see what are the principles of good care. The first and the foremost principle, which all of you will agree, is communication. One should make the woman and her companion feel welcome. Uh, they should always feel that they are free to ask questions, and they will get answers to all their questions. Use of simple and clear language by the clinician will always be helpful for making the patient comfortable and understand the problem better. And one has to support the woman in understanding her options and then making a combined decision. The second part is to organize a visit. Emergency care visits are a problem many a times. Most of the times, patient doesn't know where to go in case she has severe bleeding, or she has headache, or she throws a convulsions. Relatives don't know where to go. So this has to be discussed well in advance. In case an emergency arises, where should the patient go? That should be discussed with the patient. Care of the woman or baby referred for special care to secondary level facility should be prompt, and routine visits for the woman and baby also need to be planned in advance. Then the third part is how is the workplace and how are the administrative procedures taking on. So one has to set up and prepare the workplace where all the record keeping should be up to date. Clean, sterilized, contaminated equipment should be available for examination. Clean and disinfected gloves should be available. Now before going to the actual care, we must also take into account a very important aspect of obstetrics in today's times, where that is preconceptional counseling. The role of an obstetrician does not begin at the time when the patient is pregnant. It begins much earlier, that is in the preconceptional period itself. So it is intended to optimize a woman's health for pregnancy, ideally commencing before conception with a preconceptional visit. Now, during this visit, a thorough family medical history of both parents is obtained and a physical examination of the prospective mother is conducted. The goal of this examination is to minimize adverse health effects for the mother, fetus, and to promote a healthy pregnancy. Pre-existing conditions that may affect conception, pregnancy, or both are to be identified and addressed. Now, what can be such pre-existing conditions? It can be diabetes or it can be hypertension. We know hypertension can have serious implications to the fetus as well as to the mother. So, an optimum level of blood pressure control has to be achieved before the mother embarks upon a pregnancy. Same is true about diabetes. If the sugars are not controlled and the pregnancy occurs, then the fetus is exposed to a very high risk of carrying congenital anomalies, which we definitely do not want. So all these issues have to be discussed with the patients beforehand. Now, one more example that can be given is of neural tube defect, which is most commonly associated with folic acid deficiency, which is correctable. Then the following maternal assessment may serve as basis for this counseling. Family planning and pregnancy spacing, family history. There are certain diseases which run in families which need to be discussed. Then genetic history, medical, surgical, and psychiatric history, whether the patient is taking any medications. We know certain drugs are associated with adverse effects on the fetus. So the drug doses need to be modified or the drugs need to be changed altogether before a pregnancy is contemplated. The nutritional status is very important. We know anemia is a major killer of our mothers. So hemoglobin correction before pregnancy is of equal importance. Then other risk factors and physical examination, of course, they are important. Vaccinations should be offered to a woman who is found to be at high risk for conditions like rubella, varicella, and hepatitis. All of these we know can be transmitted, vertical transmission of these from mother to baby is possible. So the vaccination should occur beforehand. All pregnant women should be tested for HIV unless they decline the test. Then screening for STDs like syphilis is also important. Screening for sickle hemoglobinopathies, alpha and beta thalassemia. This is very important because we know that say for example for sickle cell trait, if both parents are carriers of the sickle cell trait, then there is a risk that baby born may have SS or AS pattern, and that can be known beforehand by, not exactly beforehand, but in the early part of the pregnancy through chorionic villus sampling or amniocentesis. So the couple should be made aware of their condition and the possible options that they are going to have once the pregnancy is there. Then maintaining good control of any pre-existing medical condition like diabetes, hypertension, asthma, SLE, thyroid disorders is very important. Taking 0.4 milligrams of folic acid daily while attempting pregnancy and during the first trimester of pregnancy can prevent majority of the neural tube defects. And a woman who has previously had a neural tube disease affected pregnancy should consume a therapeutic dose of 4 milligrams per day in the preconceptional period. Now coming to the antenatal care proper. So this is a flow chart of care. The first step is quick check, what we call as rapid assessment management. So while you are examining the patient, you have to simultaneously do many things like asking, checking, recording, looking, listening, feeling, identifying sign, classifying the condition, treating, and recording again. So this is a continuum of process. Now, during the first antenatal visit, one has to prepare a birth and emergency plan, which should include checking for preeclampsia, checking for anemia, checking for syphilis, checking for HIV status. And then if all are found to be normal or negative, then one has to go to routine care, that is responding to observed signs or volunteered problems, giving preventive measures, advising and counseling on the nutrition and self-care, advising on routine follow-up visits, and home delivery without skilled attendant can be considered if everything is normal. So this is what we just discussed. One has to start with RAM, that is rapid assessment and management. And if there is no emergency or a priority sign, then one can go to the systematic examination and screening, like checking all women for preeclampsia, anemia, syphilis, and HIV. Now, how should be the ANC visits? Ideally, till 28 weeks of gestation, the visits have to be once a month. Up to 36 weeks, from 28 weeks, it has to be twice a month. And thereafter, it should be weekly till delivery. But there should be a minimum of 4 ANC visits. That is, first visit at 16 weeks, second between 24 to 28, third at 32, and fourth at 36. So these are the basic minimum. So this is a type of a card which all antenatal mothers should receive, which should have details like their names and date of previous deliveries and date of birth, birth weight, etc. And then it should also have her pregnancy record, like date of the last menstrual period, her expected date of delivery, and whether her previous delivery was conducted at institute or at home, and was it conducted by trained person or not, and such particulars have to be filled meticulously. Now, there should be a regular weight monitoring at each visit. The ideal weight gain is around 11 kg in the entire pregnancy. So in the first trimester, there is hardly any weight gain, but after first trimester, the weight gain should be around 2 kg per month. The lab investigations for all women should include hemoglobin, blood grouping and RH typing, urine routine, BDRL, RBS, HBS, AG and HIV. So this is a universal screening protocol that we follow. These many investigations have to be done for each and every patient. Then one has to be aware of various risk factors which make the pregnancy more vulnerable than a routine one. And if one is aware of these risk factors, then only early referral to a higher center is possible. So if any one of these risk factors is found, then one should not wait, but just refer it to the next level. So what are these risk approaches? Elderly primary. So these women are more likely to have diabetes, hypertension. The babies are more likely to have certain genetic conditions. So this is a high risk pregnancy. A short statured primary may have problems in delivery because she may have a contracted pelvis. Malpresentations, breech, face, shoulder, all these things, they may need either delivery by a trained person or emergency or elective cesarean section. So these have to be identified beforehand. Then there can be certain emergencies like antepartum hemorrhage or bleeding in the first trimester, that is threatened abortion. So these are also emergency conditions and need early and emergent referral. Then we also know that preeclampsia, eclampsia are a very important cause of maternal mortality in India. So one has to be vigilant to pick up their signs. Twins, hydromnios are other conditions which need referral. Then there are certain signs which the patient is either telling voluntarily or you are finding it on examination, which should not be ignored, and such patients also should be taken very seriously and should be referred to the next level, like no fetal movements, rupture of the membrane which may present itself as leaking per vaginum, fever or burning micturition, any vaginal discharge with signs suggestive of HIV infection, presence of maternal habits such as smoking, alcohol or drug abuse, cough, breathing difficulty. This is more important in today's corona times. And if a patient is on anti-TB treatment. So all these things have to be asked for. And the next is to develop a birth and emergency plan, advice on nutrition, family planning, labor signs, danger signs, routine and follow-up visits, and recording positive findings. If the mother is HIV positive, adolescent or has special needs, then the mother needs to be started on antiretroviral therapy. So that is also to be taken into account. Now going to the second part, that is delivery. So this is a very important part. I know it is not so very relevant for general practitioners, but it is an important. Sometimes one may have to conduct a delivery in case of an emergency. So what are the 3 stages of labor? First stage is when the cervix dilates up to a maximum dilatation of 10 centimeters. Second stage is when the fetus is expelled through this dilated cervix. And the third stage is expulsion of the afterbirth, that is placenta and the membranes. And there's also the fourth stage of observation for 1 hour, which is very essential to see for any excessive bleeding. So this is the partograph that we use for all the patients, all the parturient patients that we deliver. So this partograph gives a very quick overview of how the labor is progressing. Here, the dilatation is plotted against dilatation of the cervix in centimeters is plotted against time, and then there are maternal and fetal well-being factors like the fetal heart rate, the maternal pulse, blood pressure, and so on. Then one of the more important conditions is rupture of membranes, because this rupture of membranes can progress to chorioamnionitis, and the patient may have fever, and the labor may complicate, and it can endanger the life of the fetus and sometimes mother also. So this should be, I believe this should be known to all. So normally a mucus plug covers the cervical canal, and the membranes, the amniotic membrane which is intact above it, prevents leakage of amniotic fluid. But if this membrane is not intact, if somehow it gets ruptured because of an ascending infection from the vagina or because of some other cause, then the liquor amount is reduced, which poses the infant and a risk of fetal distress because of oligohydramnios and also an ascending infection. So such babies will require an immediate transfer. Then one also has to be aware of what are the normal positions. A cephalic position, that is head first facing backwards, is the normal position. But if the breech is occupying the lower pole of the uterus, or the head is deflexed and face is overlying the internal os, or when the baby is transverse with the shoulder going down in the lower pole of the uterus, these are abnormal presentations. Most of the times they will require cesarean section. So these patients have to be referred. Now this is how a dilated cervix looks like. First figure is showing an undilated uneffaced cervix. The second one shows partly dilated and effaced cervix, and the third one is a fully dilated. So in case one has to perform an emergency delivery, then one has to know if the cervix is dilated or not. Then the next part is how to give an episiotomy. This is to be given at the time of crowning, that is when the head of the baby is visible at the perineum and it is stretching the vulval outlet. One may need to give it to prevent perineal tears. So the maternal benefits of giving episiotomy are that it is an incision, it is a surgical cut, so it is easy to repair, and the structures, the adjoining structures like rectum are well protected if you give a planned surgical incision. Bleeding will be less, and the second stage is also shortened by this. This is how it is repaired. It is repaired in 3 layers. First the vaginal mucosa, then the muscle, and lastly the skin. Then coming to the third stage of labor, that is expulsion of the placenta along with the membrane. So this may seem like a small step. In a primipara, it may take about 30 minutes, and in a multi, it takes only 15 minutes. But this is a very crucial step because most of the cases of PPH are going to occur immediately after this third stage. So one has to be very vigilant in this stage. So it is nothing but delivery of placenta. One has to ensure that oxytocin drugs are given to the mother after the expulsion of the placenta. If the placenta remains undelivered for 30 minutes, then one has to empty the bladder, encourage breastfeeding, which itself will increase the amount of oxytocin released by the mother endogenously, and then repeat control cord traction. For 1 hour, if it remains undelivered, then the patient is going to require a manual removal of the placenta along with intramuscular and IV antibiotics. So here definitely a trained and a skilled person is needed. Another 1 hour, if 1 hour after the delivery, if it is undelivered, then mother needs referral. So 1 hour is the golden hour. One cannot wait for more than 1 hour, and if you know that the tertiary care center is far away, or the patient is going to take more time to reach there, then it is better to start early. Do not exert excessive traction on the cord, because this may result in the cord may just the cord may just rupture, and the placenta may remain inside. Do not squeeze or push the uterus to deliver the placenta, because this can inadvertently lead to inversion of the uterus. Check the placenta and membranes after their expulsion if it is complete, and if it is incomplete, then one must suspect that some of the fragments may be retained inside and they need to be removed. And after the expulsion of the placenta, one has to check if the uterus is well contracted or not. So this is how controlled cord traction is done. One hand pushes the uterus in the cephalad direction, and the other hand, usually the dominant hand or the right hand, gives a gentle downward traction to take out the placenta. And this is to be done only once the placenta is separated and not before separation of the placenta. Now, what to do if heavy bleeding is there? This is a must know for everyone. One has to keep on massaging the uterus to expel clots if any, give 10 units oxytocin intramuscular, and immediately call for help, because this is a real emergency. One has to make sure that the IV line access is there. To start 20 units oxytocin drip at 60 drops per minute. One has to empty the bladder, because sometimes that can prevent the contraction of the uterus. And if the bleeding still persists and the uterus is soft, then continue massage with bimanual or aortic compression. Now one has to continue the IV fluids with 20 units oxytocin at 30 drops per minute, and immediate arrangements have to be made to refer the patient to a tertiary care. In the meanwhile, you can examine the perineum, lower vagina and vulva for tear if possible, repair that, and refer her to the hospital, the next level hospital. One should also not forget to collect, estimate, record blood loss throughout the third stage and immediately afterwards. So this is a very important diagram. This is the figure showing bimanual compression, wherein you can put one fist in the vagina and the other hand on the abdominal wall and try to press the uterus in between the two. And the second one is showing aortic compression. Aortic compression is usually given at the level of umbilicus to compress the aorta and to reduce the blood supply to the uterus. So care of the mother and the newborn within first hour of delivery is very important. One has to monitor, even if there is no bleeding, one has to monitor every 15 minutes, monitor mother at 2, 3 and 4 hours, and then the frequency can be reduced to 4 hours. Now, after this, one has to also advise on postpartum care and hygiene, and counsel the mother regarding birth spacing and family, because this is a very important opportunity which should not be missed. Now, these are the components of postpartum care. One has to plan her postpartum visits, advise the patient regarding her infant feeding plans, what is going to be her reproductive plan in the future, pregnancy complications, whether obstetric morbidities and recurrence risk counseling, if she has suffered any obstetric complications in this pregnancy, and if these can recur in the next pregnancy, that should be discussed. Mental health assessment, chronic health conditions, achieving healthier weights, and postpartum problems are some of the other issues which need to be discussed. Now, preventive measures and additional treatments. These include giving tetanus toxoid to all women, check TT status when last given. If unknown, then give TT dose 1 and give TT dose 2 in the in 4 weeks apart. Explain the safety of TT injection in pregnancy to women, because many women are skeptical and they are afraid of taking injections, so that fear of the injection should be removed from the mind of the patient. And of course, it should be recorded on mother's card. Then second supplementation is vitamin A. 2 lakh international units capsule after delivery or within 6 weeks of delivery is advocated. This helps in recovery. It is good for the baby also. It can have temporary complications like nausea and headache, which will just go away very quickly. And do not give capsules with high dose of vitamin A during pregnancy, because we know that vitamin A during pregnancy is teratogenic. The second and probably the most important supplementation that we give in pregnancy is iron. All pregnant, postpartum and post-abortion women should be given iron supplementation. One tablet has 60 milligrams of elemental iron and 400 micrograms of folic acid. So once a day is the minimum dose that is to be given prophylactically. And if the woman is found to be iron deficient, then a therapeutic dose can be considered. Then the newborn care. Good care of the newborn begins with good preparation. So having clean, warm towels ready for the newborn before the arrival of newborn is of utmost importance. Then having a sterile kit to tie and cut the cord should be made available. Keeping the delivery room clean, warm, keeping the mother and baby in skin-to-skin contact from birth to encourage breastfeeding, and having resuscitation equipments near delivery bed are some other important issues. Then what does this immediate newborn care actually include? It includes placing the baby on the mother's abdomen or arms, which promotes skin-to-skin contact, keeps the baby warm, and also it can be the first step towards starting breastfeeding. Then noting the time of delivery, of course, this is important for medico-legal issues. Drying the baby, wiping, discarding the wet cloth so that the baby doesn't become hypothermic, assessing baby's breathing while drying, and placing an identification label on the baby are important issues. So this is how the cord is clamped, and the lower picture is showing skin to skin contact. Then the warm chain that one should maintain is warm delivery room, immediate drying, skin to skin contact, breastfeeding, bathing and weighing should be postponed, appropriate clothing and bedding, keeping the mother and the baby together, arranging for a warm transportation and warm resuscitation. So these are all the components of warm chain to keep the baby warm. This is a chart showing what are the ideal temperatures depending upon the weight of the baby. Apart from ensuring skin to skin contact and wrapping the baby and preventing heat loss, one has to also take into account the weight of the baby. So for very low birth weight babies, the room temperature should be 34 to 35, whereas when the baby's weight is say 2.5 kg or above, such babies can do away with a temperature of 28 to 30 degrees. Now this is a short flowchart showing resuscitation of the newborn. Of course, it is not as simple as a flowchart, but the principles of this flowchart will you can just see that if the baby is term and breastfeeding, crying, having a good tone, then the baby needs just routine care in form of providing warmth, clearing airway if necessary, and keeping the ongoing evaluation continued. But if the answer to this question is no, then see if warm clear airway is available or not. Dry and stimulate the baby and see for the heart rate. If the heart rate is less than 100, then if heart rate is less than 100, then the baby is going to need positive pressure ventilation. And if the heart rate is still below 100, then the baby may be needing mechanical ventilation or ventilatory support. So that's all from my side. And I thank you all for a patient hearing.